Say I work for a television station and I put on a news program. And to get people on that program, I have to have another 10 people that I give time to each day. Somebody in Beirut, somebody else in Tokyo, someone in London, and so on. Right? And there are another 90 staff people communicating with all these people and getting everything together. So that, say, for a 1-hour television program, there are probably 100 people working. And that program goes on for an hour each day, so that it actually represents about 800 hours of human time to put on. And compare that then with the amount of time that it occupies, and you consider all the people watching it. And say 40 million people watch the program. Since it's taken 800 hours worth of time to film, that means that, there's what, about 50,000 times as much attention given to it as it took to create, right? Now, compare that to the amount of time that, say, I have if I try talking to people one-to-one. The normal work year is about 2,000 hours. That is, you take 50 weeks a year, 40 hours a week, that's 2,000. For 10 years, that's 20,000. For 50 years, that's 100,000 hours. So, if, say, somebody had a job talking to people one-to-one, at most that person would be able to communicate with other people for 100,000 hours in a lifetime. Now, that's about twice as much time in a lifetime as each hour of those 100 people working on that television show are able to take of other people's time watching them in 1 hour. So that my lifetime of talking to people, or anybody's lifetime of talking to people individually, comes down to perhaps the amount of time that's consumed in watching 2 television shows, 2 1-hour television shows on a news channel. So at that rate, you can see that if you have an opinion that is not shared with the people who are putting on the television shows, you're basically spending half of a lifetime doing what the people who make that program do in an hour. And so you can see that it's like climbing up a sand dune, in which for every step that you take up the sand dune, you are sliding down further than you walked up. And so it's to be expected that if you have views which are not consistent with those that are purveyed by the television and the news media, that you're going to have a very hard time communicating those views with other people. If there aren't a lot of people who want to pay to receive those views, as they can quite cheaply, say, by watching a television, since we don't have a lot of fees for receiving television, unless you have cable TV here or something. And it certainly is not going to be in the interests of the people who are paying to have all the resources assembled to put on news shows, when those are very rich people and investors who want to be able to make a lot of money from putting their money into those kinds of programs by advertising things and saying things that are in the interests of the people who put on those shows, which are very large corporations. So you can see that the corporations have quite an advantage. And when they have that kind of advantage, you have to wonder, well, how much really can you communicate with other people? How much are you able to actually engage other people in the kind of thinking that you do yourself all day long? How much are you able to get other people to think, to read things that they'd need to read if they want to understand how, at least you believe, that the world works. If you want to have people understand the actual effects of government's actions on people in other countries and people in this country. And if you want people to understand the effects of our economic activity on other economies around the world, how do you do it? We are probably, I shouldn't say probably, it's quite certainly, the most provincial empire that has ever existed on earth. The Romans knew a lot more about their provinces than we know about countries around the earth. The British certainly knew 10 times as much about the countries that they'd conquered, or conquered pieces of, the countries that they traded with in order to have their flag going around the world. So that we are the most ignorant empire that has ever really existed. Now, occasionally right-wingers and so on are now willing to say that, yeah, we do indeed have an empire. But it really shouldn't be debatable, since after all we have 725 military bases at least, scattered around 132 countries, when there are only 192 of them listed by the UN. So there are 60 countries that we haven't bothered to put bases in, but then we have lots of bases in some of the ones that we do have bases in, and they're awfully securely established there. It took decades, for instance, for the Greenham Common women in England to get one U.S. military base off of their soil, to get a few of our missiles off of their ground. Government of Japan has not succeeded very well in getting American bases off of Japan. Even New Zealand, which is probably the most peaceful English-speaking country on earth, has a hell of a time dealing with our insistence on having our nuclear navy come to their ports with nuclear weapons on them that they don't want to have anything to do with. And so we really do have an empire. It's a different kind of empire than existed before World War II. Our empire is really on behalf of the 8 richest countries on earth, the G8 countries, jointly running an empire through the Bretton Woods institutions, that's the World Bank, IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the World Trade Organization. And some also the GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. And we provide the muscle for that joint empire of the richest countries' dominance over the poorest countries, so that the richest people on earth can feed off the poorest people on earth and waste the resources that people need merely in order to be able to survive.